Չեմ լսում։ Հա։ Good afternoon. Thank you for accepting our invitation and coming. Firstly, allow me to read out the press release. As you know, today the central bank is going to publish the financial stability report. I will briefly stop on the provisions of the report. Firstly, about the refinancing ring. On March the 3rd, 2023 meeting, the central bank decided to maintain the refinancing rate. The inflation growth increased by also the 12 months amounted to 7. The Russian-Ukraine military conflict is continued, and the uncertainties related to that. This is negatively reflected on the economic and financial market developments in the main partner countries of Armenia. The expected slowdown in economic growth in partner countries is accompanied by an expansion of the inflationary environment. The latter is the result of value chain disruptions and accelerated inflation in international commodity markets. Thus, inflationary impacts on the Armenian economy from the external sector will persist. In the first quarter of 2022, developments in the economic activity of the Republic of Armenia were more positive than expected. The significant influx of international visitors is reflected in the high growth of the service sector and the expansion of the aggregate demand. It contributes to improvement of the Republic of Armenia external balance and appreciation of Armenian dram in foreign exchange market. It is expected that the latter will also have a positive impact on weakening domestic inflationary environment and lowering inflation expectations. In view of the above, the board judges appropriate to leave the refinancing rate still unchanged. The CBA board is committed to take adequate measures to neutralize any possible risk of the anchoring of inflation expected. It is projected that in the 12-month inflation will gradually decline and will approach the target of the 4% in the medium term. The CBA board considers that as a result of geopolitical developments, the high uncertainty related to the macroeconomic perspective remains. At the same time, the risk of inflation deviation from the projected trajectory are mainly balanced. Should the risk materialize in any direction, the board stands ready to respond accordingly in the fulfillment of the price stability. If you don't mind, before turning to the questions on the financial stability, I will make some observations. Have you got the presentation? Our financial stability report related to 2021. In terms of the main trends, I would like to identify the following one. In 2021, in the retail market, there was significant growth after the unfavorable shocks and impacts, influences in all of 2020. There were growth in all the sectors. The financial cycles index, you can see on your left. It reflects the financial market growth and loans trend by achieving to recovery of growth phase. The mortgage market, you can see the red line, and the blue one doesn't include the mortgage market. All the loans have been growing. The mortgage loans in particular, the flows are expressively presenting the activation trends. The flow one is the last two graphs of our slide. On the bottom, there were growth of independent by counterfeiting behavior. You can see the warming of the market probability given the Republic of Armenia's economic standing and the economic stand. The central bank board the buffer maintained at the minimum zero level. In the mortgage market, to address the risk, the central bank introduced the broadly exercised in the international market LTV requirements. Given the foreign exchange loans risk, there's lower threshold set for the foreign currency or the more stringent LTV level. The portfolio of loans has been changed and the risk absorption capacity by significantly lowering down the bad quality loans weight, which contributed to the banks and lenders demonstrated more conservative approach. The banking system risk absorption capacity has been improved by registering the capital and sale growth. It's significant to compared to the long-term policy of the central bank. Thank you. That was briefly about the report. Let's turn to the questions. Aren. Thank you. Foreign developments related question. On Wednesday, the U.S. is prepared to raise the rate by half percent. What kind of expectations do you have in terms of the movement? Are there risk for outflow? And there was a press conference by Agolina, and there was a reference that it sounds like the inflation pressures on Russia's economy, if not disappeared, then stabilized. Have you any discussions with your Russian counterparts? How do you see this macroeconomic situation in the short term? We haven't discussed the macroeconomic development short-term programs. The Russian central bank set to 14 vis-a-vis 17%. As to the raising by the Federal Reserve, the rate, this is 0.5%. In my opinion, and everyone in the market, it's not the last step implemented by the Federal Reserve. In front of the Federal Reserve as well as other U.S. agencies, there is an issue faced for the economy to make soft landing, which is quite complicated because by many specialists it's indicated the fact that the Federal Reserve System rising the rate and stoppage of the assets, this process has been delayed for some reason, and this is going to lead to inflation, which leads to some recession risk, and the highest hazard could be faced by the U.S. economy stagflation. And also the second part of the question, I'm sorry, what will happen in our country? We should watch not only U.S. Federal Reserve rate growth, which can contribute naturally that the foreign currencies are going to be flow to the U.S. market, but also our internal values, which is about risk added value indicator. Actually, after some growth, it's going to be somehow reduced by 0.5%. There was some decrease, And under these circumstances, we don't see significant risk for the outflow. Do you mean? I mean the euro bond risk, value added risk. I wanted to ask what is happening in the USD AMD exchange rate market. The former Minister of Finance shares an opinion that it's going to be dropped to 220. There will be growth again, and there is an opinion that it will be stabilized within month on the 1.5 month. I think when speaking about any phenomena, before doing that, we have to go to the fundamentals. What's the reason for the behavior of the exchange rate? If we understand the integrity of the factors which lead to some manifestations of the exchange rate, we would be able to easily understand the trajectory, which contains some uncertainties in it. In this case, as mentioned, as the board has discussed today, we see a situation that in the Republic of Armenia we have international visitors. We don't classify these people as tourists or other type category because as of now, the information we have is not enough to clearly classify these people. So I would refrain from, I would use this international visitor term. These are people who arrived to the Republic of Armenia, and a situation has created in Armenia that the external demand is up. That means that our services become exportable. If these people buy our resort sites or restaurants, they make some expenditures. This presumes that this is an export growth in the payment balance of Armenia, and this situation leads to the fact that we have foreign currency progressive growth with respect to the demand, which led to some stabilization of dram. So we have to understand this phenomena we're facing. How fundamental is it? And the people who appeared in Armenia, for how long they plan to stay in Armenia, what will be their behavior? The central bank board's today's decision is based on to maintain the rate unchanged. So we have to follow their behavior and the economic implications due to the, and we will see the reflection in the exchange rate. As of now, since we have a freely floating exchange rate and it's decided by the market, I won't make any assessments if it's going to be up and down. This won't be a useful conversation. The useful thing is that we have to see the factors behind this process. Civic. Mr. Galstyan, Ministry of Economy doesn't share the central bank's standing that the construction and banking sectors is going down. You mentioned there is crediting growth. Is this about the business banks, business credits or not, loans or not? When I mentioned related to 2021, the crediting growth trends, it was mainly in the mortgage loans market. I will tell later on the other part. If the exchange factors are being filtered, there were some fluctuations. We can see that it was almost zero without exchange fluctuation, including the exchange rate fluctuations. We had 5.5 decrease in the credit portfolio given the fluctuation zero. So now we have 36% growth compared to the previous year. For the business loans, 5% decrease. As to the first question that the central bank view is shared by Ministry of Economy or not. We have 4 monitoring and 4 forecasting meetings. This is a monitoring meeting when we the main macro indicators don't review on during the next meeting. We'll present the forecasts. I want to mention that compared to our previous predictions, the year is going better, and some reviews are going to be made on economic growth. It's about the Russian visitors and transfers. Have you any observations? Which part of them is transmitted in Russian rubles? Which part in other currencies, euros, USD? Whether the Russian central bank colleagues gave some explanations if the Russian Federation President, this 79 order is how it's being commented, whether the currency residents are able to wire foreign currency to Armenia, because it's the main concern for them. Did you have any cases or in the banking system when this European or US correspondent banks for check during the checking or post checking 2 months later did any calls and demand cancellation of some of the transactions by the Russian citizens via Armenian banks to Europe? Thank you for the question. Again, let me start from the second question. We in Armenia, the banking system is traditional for non-residents. In the rest of the world, not only in Armenia, there are specific rules of game in terms of the compliance and know your client. There is a much more stricter procedural oversight always than the local residents. The Armenian banking system in this situation did a very correct job by maintaining all the international norms. At the same time, we see under these norms we have not only Russian Federation but also other international citizens when coming to the bank and demonstrating that their economic interest moves to Armenia. They have an opportunity to open banks in the Armenian banks and be served by the banks. And the number of such consumers is about 16,000 now, who are onboarded by our system, and the center of their economic center interest is moved to Armenia, at least in the short term. Actually, they opened more accounts than physical, because it's between 1 to 2 accounts opened for per person. Then we have new accounts opened. If the currency opening is big, it will be whether it's more USD or rubles. I can presume that there's more rubles than USD, because the Russian residents are the major part of these consumers, clients. It's about natural persons. The significant part is natural persons. As to the correspondent banks of the foreign banks and the transactions through correspondent banks, there are some problems. There have been some problems with the Russian counterparts in terms of the relationship, sanctions, etc. But the system does work. There are some accidents, of course, because we are in a situation we haven't faced before. There is a coordinated nature of the banking system in overall. Please, for the first part, whether it's rubles or dollar, the context was where the inflow linked to the exchange rate. As the chairman mentioned, the major part is in rubles coming to Armenia, but our system has do not want to maintain open positions for any of the currency, and this is reflected on the USD MD exchange rate. Now, as to your second question, you said that there are capital limitations and the exchange rate stabilization. We can see that in Russia there were exchange rate regulations, which means USD ruble exchange rate is not a problem as it used to be a month ago. And the link is that in Armenia, despite we see huge flow in rubles, but in terms of currency, the AMD is being valued with regards to USD, and in line with the rates, the restrictions are softened. The capital restrictions are being decreased in Russia slowly. Related to the exchange rate, can we presume that now the seasonal fluctuations will become more frequent? There will be demand for the foreign currency, which will keep it lower. If the export is increased, there will be more demand. That's why we said during our internal discussions, people when say export, they presume that they take Burek bottle, go to the border, cross the border, go to Georgia, sell it, this Burek bottle, get currency and come back to Armenia, and this is recorded as export. And under this most recent events, we see that our restaurants became exporters. We have clients who present external demand to our services, and then it's export of services. The structure of the export can be somehow changed too. Civic, you mentioned that business loans are down to 5%. Please comment. What's the reason for this phenomena? According to our observations, compared to 2021, according to our observations, there are two phenomena took place last year. There was lower demand to the local products due to economic development. Some clients tried to postpone their possible investment or did different plans. And secondly, there were stricter requirements to the lenders by banks. Then we see under these two-factor influence, there was some decrease, but the phenomena still remains in our mortgage crediting market. Then the exchange rate influence, then you'll see that -5 is even above. And the other thing mentioned by our colleagues is that in 2021 they were growing significantly because there were government programs, and the result was that 2021 was based on a higher ground basis. The most recent credit policy analysis states that in quarter 4, by survey of the banks, they are ready to mitigate the crediting requirements. Does this mean they have more assets to be allocated as loans? If I'm not mistaken, in the statistics, starting from the second half of the 2021, the banks demonstrated increase of term deposits. Whether this means is there any surplus they don't know how to allocate. As to the credit requirements mitigation, on a quarterly basis we do this back lending survey in English, which relates to the non-price mitigation changing trends. If I correctly remember, in second half of 2021, this means that the bank's risk appetite has grown somehow, which means that in the following months there will be lending increase and growth, because according to lending specialists or the boards in the banks, there is a situation created where the more risky loans could be given in Armenia compared to the previous period. The absorption capacity is increased, and this also explains for your second comment that there were resources which could be used for the lending. We have at least 1.5% for January, February, March, April, even more. For the legal acts, business loans, and natural persons loans as well. Mortgage is going faster, of course, at a higher pace. In the lending portfolio has decreased compared to after the 2021 programs, because these seasonal loans were zero rate. Now it increased. In the beginning of the seasonal work, did you note any trend towards recovery of agricultural loans? According to the figures under my hand, in 2021, they increased by 12% to physical persons. It's the 21 December compared to January, within 12 months. As to the 2022 beginning of year, it's 3.34% within 3 months of 2022. Arthur. More questions, please. Copper prices related. In the recent week in China, the risk has increased again. According to your information, how much metal can follow this risk, and how this can impact the demand for copper? The informations are popular in general, they're related to Shanghai port. The result is, as in our press release, you can see the overall value chain has been distorted, which contain a risk which can impact on the price increase in the raw material mining markets. We can see that the value chain is being distorted. On the other side, we know that the highest demand is in China for this product. If it's slowing down or stop, then we can see that we can face difficulties with export, but it's not ruled out at the same time that there will be some rise in prices just due to this distortion of chains. So we have to follow how long and deep this distortion is going to be. This is a monitoring meeting, as it was mentioned. In the past period, the copper prices and the mining industry prices, we presume they're going to be at the high level, at the medium term at least, and there's some risk up until now. At least the risk you mentioned are not yet manifested in the markets. Armenia is already paying in rubles for gas to Russia. If the Eurasian Union switches to rubles in trading, does it mean that the dependence upon dollar would be reduced in Armenia? What would the implication? Actually, we don't expect big changes here because for us, ruble is another exchange foreign currency. So due to the developments, we have to look at the situation in the currency market. There could be different scenarios. If, for example, if we are supposed to buy the ruble in Armenian drams, I mean the entrepreneurs, that's one situation. If the demand for the ruble, which comes from the objective to pay for gas, should be reflected on the exchange operations, so this should be converted from dollar to ruble to dram and then into ruble. This would be somehow reflected on the market. Also, related to Russian banks, it sounds like in the past there was no such question asked. Whether our banks have correspondent banks in the Russian banks under sanctions, how to release their resources from there. The same about entrepreneurs. If they have assets, whether they can get back to Armenian banks, for example. I meet with the bank management every week. I haven't heard such concerns from them. There is no similar concern shared by the entrepreneurs as well. So we hope that the people were able to manage the risks and avoid the complications evolving from this risk. As to the mortgage, starting from when you expect this overwhelming reduction, given the limitations for the return of income tax, which are going to be enforced since June the 1st. It's difficult to say when it's going to happen, this potential impacts of this development for Yerevan First project, but it's going to be continued elsewhere. We have to have clearer information how much potential supply possibilities in place in first and second zones of Yerevan. This will have some impact on the market development, but to what extent I can't say for sure. Now, as the most recent information, let me share it. We also follow the construction permits, collection rate. We don't see any trade so far. It's still yet at the highest historical level, all of these indicators which describe. One important thing should be presented, both in the construction market, both supply and demand. I think they're important. There is demand in the mortgage market, but there is also supply. The final act number is quite high, and the new construction permits are quite many compared to the traditional trends. Thank you. Thank you.